Lisa Thompson had just spent her last $50 on school supplies for her students, but one mother's social media post was about to change everything. The morning sun filtered through the cracked windows of Lincoln Elementary School as Lisa arranged the small pile of supplies she'd purchased the night before. 24 pencils, 3 packs of colored paper, glue sticks, and a set of crayons, everything bought with money from her already stretched paycheck. At 28, Lisa had been teaching 3rd grade for 4 years, and she'd learned that the school's supply budget was more like a cruel joke than an actual resource. The district allocated $50 per classroom per semester for supplies, which barely covered a week's worth of basic materials for her 22 students. Most of Lisa's students came from families struggling to make ends meet. Their parents worked multiple jobs, relied on food stamps, or lived paycheck to paycheck. Asking them to buy school supplies was asking them to choose between their children's education and putting food on the table. So Lisa made the choice for them. Every month, she spent between $150 and $200 of her $2,800 monthly salary on pencils, paper, art supplies, and books. She shopped at dollar stores, clipped coupons, and sometimes went without lunch to make sure her students had what they needed to learn. Her colleagues thought she was crazy. "You can't save every kid, Lisa," her mentor teacher had warned her during her first year, "and you definitely can't afford to try." But Lisa couldn't stop herself. When she saw 8-year-old Danny Rodriguez trying to complete his math worksheet with a pencil stub so short he could barely hold it, or watched Sofia Martinez carefully erasing her writing over and over because she only had one piece of paper, Lisa's heart broke a little more each time. That Tuesday morning, as Lisa set out the new supplies, Danny was the first to notice. "Miss Thompson," he said, his eyes wide with excitement, "are these new pencils for us?" "They are," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice cheerful, despite the fact that buying those pencils meant she'd be eating peanut butter sandwiches for the rest of the week. Danny picked up one of the bright yellow pencils and examined it like it was made of gold. "It's so sharp, and it has a good eraser." Other students began to gather around the supply table, their faces lighting up at the sight of fresh materials. For most adults, a new pencil was nothing special. For these kids, it represented possibility. The chance to do their best work without having to worry about broken leads or worn-out erasers. "Can I really use the colored paper for my book report cover?" asked Emma, a quiet girl who rarely spoke up in class. "Of course," Lisa said. "That's what it's for." As her students settled into their morning work, Lisa felt the familiar mixture of satisfaction and anxiety that came with her monthly supply purchases. Satisfaction because she could see the difference it made in her students' faces and work. Anxiety because she was already calculating how she'd make her rent payment stretch until the next payday. What Lisa didn't notice was Maria Rodriguez, Danny's mother, standing outside the classroom window. Maria had arrived early to drop off Danny's lunch money, 5 crumpled dollar bills she'd found in her car's cup holder. As a single mother working 2 part-time jobs, Maria often forgot small things like lunch money until the last minute. She'd been about to knock on the classroom door when she overheard Lisa's conversation with the students about the supply. Maria watched through the window as her son's face lit up over something as simple as a new pencil, and she began to piece together what was happening. Later that morning, during her break from her cleaning job at the nearby office building, Maria approached Lisa in the school's parking lot. "Miss Thompson," Maria called out, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Lisa turned, surprised to see one of her students' parents during school hours. "Of course, Mrs. Rodriguez. Is everything okay?" Maria gestured toward the school building. "Those supplies in your classroom, the new pencils and paper, where did they come from?" Lisa felt her cheeks flush. She'd always tried to keep her personal spending on supplies private, not wanting to make other teachers feel guilty or to draw attention to the school's funding problem. "The district provides supplies," Lisa said carefully. Maria shook her head. "My sister works in the district office. She told me how much money schools actually get for supplies. It's not enough for what I saw in there." Lisa was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Sometimes I pick up a few extra things with your own money." It wasn't a question. Maria had done the math. She knew what teachers made, and she knew what school supplies cost. "Mrs. Rodriguez, it's really not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Maria interrupted, her voice passionate. "My son came home yesterday talking about how excited he was to have a good pencil for his math test. Do you know how that made me feel? Knowing that my child was so grateful for something I should be able to provide, but can't. Lisa's heart sank. Mrs. Rodriguez, I never meant to make you feel— No, Maria said firmly. You misunderstand me. I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with the system that makes a teacher spend her own money so my son can have a pencil. And I'm grateful, more grateful than you'll ever know, that you care enough about these kids to do what you're doing. Maria pulled out her phone. This story needs to be told. People need to know what's happening in our school. Please don't, Lisa said quickly. I don't want any attention. I just want to teach. And you should be able to teach without going broke buying pencils, Maria replied. Miss Thompson, with your permission, I'd like to share your story. Not to embarrass you, but to show people what dedication looks like. That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table and crafted a Facebook post that would change everything. I want to tell you about my son's teacher, Miss Lisa Thompson at Lincoln Elementary. Today I learned that she spends hundreds of dollars of her own money every month to buy school supplies for her students, kids whose families can't afford to buy them. She does this quietly, without recognition, because she believes every child deserves the tools they need to learn. My son Danny came home excited about a good pencil, something most of us take for granted. But for kids in underfunded schools, a new pencil is a luxury. Ms. Thompson makes sure it's not. Teachers shouldn't have to choose between paying their own bills and providing basic supplies for their students. But Ms. Thompson makes that choice every month, and our kids are better for it. If you've ever wondered whether teachers are heroes, let me tell you, they are. And Ms. Thompson is proof of that. Their teachers are heroes. Lincoln Elementary education matters. Maria added a photo she'd taken earlier of Danny proudly holding his new pencil, his smile bright and genuine. She hesitated for a moment before hitting share, knowing that once the post was public, there would be no taking it back. Then she thought about Lisa's worn shoes and Danny's excitement over a pencil, and she pressed the button. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the post had been shared 50 times. By morning, it had been shared over 1,000 times. Local news stations began reaching out to Maria, asking for interviews. The school district's phone lines were flooded with calls from community members wanting to help. Lisa arrived at school Thursday morning to find reporters waiting in the parking lot. Miss Thompson, called out Janet Walsh from Channel 7 News, can we talk to you about your students and the supplies you've been purchasing for them? Lisa felt her stomach drop. She'd hoped Maria's post would stay within their small community, but it was clear the story had spread far beyond that. I really don't have anything to say, Lisa said, trying to make her way into the school building. Miss Thompson, called another reporter, people are calling you a hero. How does that make you feel? Lisa stopped and turned around. I'm not a hero. I'm just a teacher trying to do my job. If you want to call someone a hero, talk to the single parents working 2 jobs to support their kids, or the students who come to school ready to learn despite everything they're facing at home. Those are the heroes. But Lisa's modesty only made the story more compelling. By Thursday afternoon, the local news had picked up the story. By Friday, it had gone national. The response was unprecedented. Donations began pouring in from across the country. A retired teacher in Oregon sent a box of art supplies. A businessman in Florida mailed a check for $500. Elementary school students in California organized a supply drive and shipped boxes of pencils, paper, and books. The PTA, which had been struggling to fund basic programs, suddenly found itself coordinating donation efforts. The school principal, who had watched helplessly as her teachers struggled with inadequate resources, was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. In 20 years of education, Principal Sarah Martinez told the gathered news crews, I've never seen anything like this. Miss Thompson's story has opened people's eyes to what's really happening in our school. But the most meaningful response came from the community itself. Local businesses began stepping forward. Martinez Auto Repair donated $1,000 and committed to providing school supplies every semester. Riverside Grocery started a program where customers could purchase supplies that would be donated directly to Lincoln Elementary. A group of local parents, inspired by Maria's post, organized what they called Supply Saturdays, monthly community events where families would gather to assemble supply packages for students in need. This isn't just about one teacher or one school, explained Jennifer Kim, one of the organizing parents. This is about making sure no child goes without the basic tools they need to learn, and no teacher has to choose between their own financial security and their students' needs. The story resonated because it revealed a truth that many people hadn't fully understood. Teachers across the country were quietly spending their own money to fill the gaps in education funding. Lisa's story became a symbol of a much larger issue. 3 weeks after Maria's initial Facebook post, Lisa stood before a packed auditorium at the monthly school board meeting. She hadn't asked to speak, but the board had invited her to address the crowd of community members who had come to advocate for increased education funding. "When I became a teacher," Lisa began, her voice slightly shaky but growing stronger with each word, "I knew I wouldn't get rich doing this job. But I didn't become a teacher for the money. I became a teacher because I believe every child deserves a chance to succeed. What I didn't expect was that caring about my students would mean choosing between my own financial stability and their educational needs. I didn't expect that providing basic supplies would require me to sacrifice my own basic needs. But here's what I've learned over the past few weeks. I'm not alone. There are teachers all over this district, all over this state, all over this country who are making the same choices I've been making. And there are community members who, once they understood what was happening, stepped up to help. This isn't about me. This is about what happens when we decide that our children's education is truly a priority. This is about what's possible when we work together." The response was a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The school board voted unanimously to increase the supply budget for all elementary schools in the district. The city council committed to exploring additional funding sources for education. The state education department announced it would review supply allocation formulas statewide. But perhaps most importantly, the community had awakened to its power to make a difference. 6 months later, Lisa stood in her classroom, which was now fully stocked with supplies donated by community members and funded by the district's increased budget. Her students, including Danny, who was thriving with proper materials, were working on a project about community heroes. "Miss Thompson," Danny said, looking up from his poster, "can I write about my mom? She's the one who told everyone about how you help us." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Lisa said. "Your mom did something very brave by sharing our story. And can I write about you too? Because you're a hero too." Lisa knelt down beside Danny's desk. "You know what, Danny? I think the real heroes are all the people who came together to help. Your mom, the people who donated supplies, the parents who organized the supply Saturdays, even you and your classmates for working so hard. Sometimes being a hero isn't about doing something big and dramatic. Sometimes it's about caring enough to do what's right, even when it's hard." Danny nodded thoughtfully, then returned to his poster. Lisa watched him work, marveling at how much had changed since that morning when she'd spent her last $50 on pencil. The money wasn't the most important part of what had happened, though it had certainly made her life easier. The most important part was the reminder that she wasn't alone, that there were people in her community who cared about education, who valued teachers, and who were willing to act when they saw a need. Lisa had learned that stories have power. Maria's simple Facebook post had accomplished more than years of budget meetings and administrative memos. It had connected hearts to a cause, and hearts moved people to action in ways that statistics never could. As she looked around her classroom, at students engaged in learning with proper tools, at supplies that would last the whole semester, at the thank you letters from donors taped to her bulletin board, Lisa realized that sometimes the most extraordinary changes begin with the most ordinary acts of love. She'd bought those pencils because it was the right thing to do. She'd never expected that simple act to spark a movement that would benefit not just her students, but children throughout the district. But that's how change happens, not with grand gestures or perfect plans, but with people who care enough to do what they can, even when what they can do seems small. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, you discover that what seems small to you is actually the beginning of something much bigger than you ever imagined.